pronounce your name?
Lubelczyk.
Lubelczyk. All right, Dave Lubelczyk, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us on the ROI and You Career Success Tips show. You and I have known each other for quite a while, and I always love to talk shop with you. And before we kind of jump into about you, and I always love to talk about like what's going on in the world. I was just on vacation last week and was happily not paying attention too much to what's happening in marketing, and just curious what you see.
I've been staying away from the news, so I've been reading a lot of I've been reading a lot of Seth Godin again. I had gotten away from him and got back into his books and his blog and stuff. So he's been I've been getting a lot of stuff fed through him. And I've been reading a lot on relationships. I'm finding that because we all locked ourselves away, everybody rekindled a lot of relationships with their family and their friends, but we kind of lost relationships with our local restaurant and barbershop and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think one thing we're going to see in the next couple of years is that rekindling of the relationship, but it's also change because I think we've realized, losing some of our favorite places during COVID, we realized just how important that local coffee shop is, or that local, not only to you because you get your coffee every morning, but also to the downtown ecosystem and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm seeing more and more of people thinking about what is that relationship and how are things interrelated and how are businesses interrelated, and more importantly, how we're all building relationships. Again, I'm hoping we're going to get away from the kind of spammy versions of sales funnels and more
Hmm.
into more of a relationship kindling thing. And actually, Seth, I had a quote 4 or 5 weeks ago now, and he said, "When we trade attention, trust for attention, that's when things go awry," or something to that effect. And it was that idea of, he was the original permission marketer guy. He wrote the book on it years and years ago, and yet we're finding that people are like, "Well, I asked them,
Right,
but that's
right.
still not permission. That's still not trust. That's still." And so I think we're going to see more and more of people trying to, think about trust and think about validity and authenticity of information and brands. And I think it all comes out of, the fake news phenomenons and all of that stuff that we've been going through over the last few years. People are really looking at, who is authentic, and, who am I going to actually spend time and build a relationship with. And, our favorite brands are included.
Well, what are some of your favorite brands?
I'm a big fan these days. I moved to Providence not that long ago, and I'm a big fan of the local places. I'm really enjoying those small neighborhood local. I would say my new favorite brand is right here in Olneyville, is Troop. They are such an authentic brand. They believe in the neighborhood. They create partnerships in the neighborhood constantly. And I talked all about, they had to pivot many times over the last year and a half, 2 years now with the pandemic, and they stayed true to themselves. Every time they had to put up plexiglass barriers, or every time they had to, change, how you listen to music. We can't have a DJ at the end with everybody dancing. And they still went back and thought, what is our brand? What is our culture? Why are we here? What are we trying to do? They've downsized their menu, but yet they up the level of specials, so they're still providing you this really cool, funky, urban, hip hop vibe with amazing food that's true to them. And, yeah, I think they're probably my number one favorite brand right now. And it's good that they're my neighbor and I get to visit them regularly and have some really good food and some good music and some good drinks. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that's a really good example of how a really small business can do branding really, really well and connect with their customers. And I think that that's really important because I think a lot of small local businesses, it's hard. COVID has been hard and feel overwhelmed. But, if you can do a few things right, and that's right for your brand, and understanding what to focus on is huge.
Well, yeah, and it goes. I mean, this goes way back 20 years now, from the beginning of starting my branding company. Is our tagline was because brand is everything, and it's that idea that every little thing that a company does adds up to that brand experience. And I think to use Troop as an example, everyone there understands the culture. Everyone there understands the mission. Everyone's there wants to be there because of that. And I think that's it. Whether it's the receptionist or the guy cleaning off the tables or the person chopping the vegetables to get ready out in the back, they all eat, sleep, breathe, live the culture. You see them sitting there on their day off, eating and drinking and listening to music too. So it's that idea that if you can build a culture where everybody embodies and understands what is the purpose of this organization, what's the purpose of this company, what's the purpose of these products, you really can build a very strong brand, and you're going to create a community within your organization, and then it's going to extend out to your patrons and your customers. And it's easier to do it with your neighborhood restaurant and bar. But some of the bigger brands have done it over the years too. Starbucks did it for a long time. They lost the way. They've gotten it back. They go back and forth. I think Wall Street pressure kind of wavers a lot of really strong brands over time. But really understanding that is the key to it all.
Nice, nice. And I love how we're just rolling right into this understanding of what branding really is without saying branding 101. But let's talk a little bit about your career journey, just so that recent grads and emerging professionals can understand what yours was like. And maybe you can talk about maybe some different choices that you made that maybe you would go back and do differently, or what are some of the important things to focus on?
Well, the first thing that I did, and it's funny, I was just thinking about it as we were getting ready for the show, is I said I would never work anywhere where I couldn't wear sneakers to work. And it was this weird thing that I said when I was in college, and all my friends like, yeah, that'll change or whatever. And it's funny because I very rarely wear sneakers now. I have a million different funky shoes, but it wasn't necessarily the sneakers themselves. It was that culture of being able to be you. And when a lot of and when I graduated, we were in a recession, and a lot of people took you know, retail management training jobs and things like that. And I kind of held out to do kind of things I wanted to do. And I ended up at a small newspaper for a while. I drove a forklift, which at the time I thought a business grad driving a forklift and receiving windows was, at a bottom of my career. But looking back now, working for a lumber yard that was going bankrupt, that couldn't buy 2x4s because they didn't have any credit left, and having to keep the customers happy anyways. I learned so many valuable lessons on what to do and not do in a business. That 8 months that I worked in a lumber yard that was failing, and moved on. But I've done a lot of different things. I've done video editing and multimedia development. I've been a graphic designer. I've been a web developer. I took my tour through the creative world, and then started out on my own as what was going to be a branding company. I was going to do a lot of corporate branding work and logo design and stuff, and I loved doing that kind of stuff. But it very quickly evolved with the whole brand is everything concept into a consulting firm, and that's kind of for the last 18 years. That's kind of what I've been. I've done some variations on it, but working with big brands like Verizon Wireless, helping some of their call centers to be more authentic on the phone and show some more empathy to working with your small mom and pops, and some of my colleagues too. I worked with Justin Kerr, the marketing pirate. I think you probably had him on your podcast before. He did a session with me, and that was the early days of him moving towards being the marketing pirate. So it's always fun to work with people and then see where they go with things and how they run with it. And I think that's been the most rewarding part of my career is, yeah, you've got to make a living, but also to make a difference and to have an impact on somebody is so much more rewarding for me.
Yeah, definitely. We had a really fun call with Justin. We did a show with him a couple months ago, I would say. So if you're watching or listening, you should definitely go check that back out because Justin is amazing and really has figured out the brand identity piece and how important that is for brand recognition. As soon as anybody sees in their LinkedIn somebody dressed like a pirate, but not like a Halloween pirate, like legit, like a reenactor pirate. And really, they take it seriously from a historical perspective, and how he's bridged that into his marketing, I think really helps him stand out in his branding, that people understand. But it also kind of translates to the marketing elements of just not just doing things for the sake of doing them, right? Like kind of thinking
Yeah.
outside the box, and how do
Well,
you
and,
reach your
and
goals?
when him and I talked about that, it was an offhanded comment. I'm into steampunk. You can see my hats in the background, and he's into pirates and pirate reenacting. And we just got talking about it. And then I was, offhandedly said, "Hey, why don't you be the marketing pirate?" And he was like, like you said, I can't do that. That's hokey or whatever. But over time, he evolved it in. But it goes to that authentically you. Who are you? And not being afraid to let people see other sides of you. There's a lot of personal branding stuff out there that's dress the way you want to be, go just for the job you want to be, or present yourself the way you want to be. But if it's not authentically you, if you're putting on that suit and tie and button down the old 1960s IBM man kind of look, or the shoulder pads of the women of the 80s, because that's the power suit you're supposed to wear. If it isn't authentically you, you're not going to be happy doing it. And if you're happy doing it, you're going to do such a better job. And I think, Justin has really embraced that. He's a perfect example of someone who's brought himself into his own personal brand in a way that is relatable. He can make
Mm-hmm.
a lot of really good lessons with it, and take it forward. And it's funny. I helped him with that, and then I've kind of taken it. And a lot of my new stuff that I'm rolling out with my stuff has very big steampunk element to it, a very classic, old, vintage label, vintage fonts, and I actually talked to him about my brand, and he's like, yeah, everybody else is going very sleek and modern, Dave, and you're going the exact opposite, and I wouldn't expect anything different. And, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Well, I think it speaks to what you do with your clients, right? Is helping them. But one of the prep questions that are in the show notes is explain to a kindergartner what you do. So I'll let you take the story from there.
So that story, actually, when you asked me that question, I answered literally what I said to my 4-year-old. Now he is 20, almost 21. He's in college. But when he was 4, he said, his mom's a doctor, so he fully understood that. But he's like, Dad, what do you do? And I said, I fix broken companies or fix broken businesses. And he understood the concept of broke, and he understood businesses. And it was, a way for a 4-year-old to really understand the complexities of branding and marketing and business consulting and all the things that I was doing. I was able to boil it down to a very simple lesson with him. But, fixing broken companies takes everything from getting people over that hurdle, that stuck feeling that they've had for a long time. The cul-de-sac that Godin talks about in his dip book. I think you asked me to put books on for the picture for the promo, and one of the ones I put on there was The Dip by Seth Godin, because it's a really quick read, but it really talks about that idea of, are you just in a low point where you're going to come back out of the other side, or are you in this cul-de-sac where you just keep going round and round and round?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies get that way. They get stale in their thinking, or they get stuck in their thinking, or we always did it that way, or it's never going to get better, or it's always going to be as good as it is. And and you really need to kind of think differently on a regular basis. So that's when I say I fix broken companies to 4-year-olds. That's what I mean by it.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is a good jumping off point to talk about careers too, because you can easily get into a cul-de-sac in your career. I know that we actually worked for the same newspaper company, although I don't know that we worked at the same time, but
We
that
never
was,
overlapped. I left probably. I went to drive the forklift right around when you were coming in the door. So yeah,
yeah.
I
But
had
I,
taken a part-time job doing multimedia development, and so I needed a more flexible schedule. So I left and drove the forklift as the breadwinning job, so I could advance my multimedia career. But yeah, we missed each other probably by about 6 months at the
That's
most.
so funny, right? It's such a small world.
Yeah.
But I think this brings up a good point, right? Even what you just said, that you took a job so that you could advance your career, even though you felt that it was maybe a little bit not, you had gone to college. This is not something that a person with a college degree does. So you were working for a paycheck, but then what were you, can you talk about that a little bit? What you were doing on the
Yeah, so,
side?
so I had been working in the newspaper in the sales department, and I really wanted to be at an ad agency. And you know that paper intimately because you worked there. And we helped little businesses, and we drew up ads and stuff, but it wasn't really the creative outlet that I wanted. And so I needed to go somewhere else. And I really, I was in love with video. As much as I enjoyed working for the paper, it's a great family business. I still stop in every time I'm down there and
Me
say
too.
hi.
Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't the right place for me. And so I had this opportunity to work for Cape Cod Community College in their media department, but it was only part-time. And, the gentleman that hired me, Steve, was like, this could go full-time and you've got a great, but you gotta be able to work these hours. And so I had to make a decision on, do I want to work, part-time there and find another part-time job, or do I want to stay where I was? And I made the choice to take the chance and to do it. And I think that was a big step for me, and it led to so many other things down the line. That was kind of the jumping off of my design and multimedia and web development portion of my career. But yeah, sometimes years later, I was talking to some entrepreneur. Actually, in the last year or two, I was talking to some entrepreneurs under the idea of, don't think of it as a crappy job at a Subway or whatever. Think of it as you're your own patron. You're earning money so that you can follow your dream. And I think if we think of it that way, you're not the waitress, you're not the actress who has to wait tables. You're the waitress who's a patron for the person who wants to be an actress. And it's a great mindset. And mindset's a huge piece of it all. Looking at things from a positive perspective. Like I said, when I was driving the forklift, I was like, this really stinks. I wish I had full time over there. All that kind of stuff. But in the end, not only did it allow me to have that opportunity, which exploded that side of the early part of my career, but it also gave me some skills that I've used, later on as a consultant that I never thought I would have had. And to be honest with you, I'm glad I did have, to see the front lines of a company that, was having issues. It was a family run business for years, had been taken over, and it just was poorly run. And I ended up learning a lot from it. So, and you don't understand what you learn from any given thing until you look back. In my book, which was a collection of articles that I written. I was a blogger before anybody knew what blogging
I was gonna
was.
say, you are an early adopter. Like, even when you were doing web and video work, that was very early on.
Yeah, no, I used to write in the early days of Constant Contact. I used to write a newsletter because that's what they called it, but it really was a blog, and I sent it out to people every other week. I'd write this little blurb article about talking to my kid and how that relates to business or whatever. And in one of them, I talked about my first job, which is actually the hardest job interview I ever had. I was a grocery store bagger at Angelo's grocery store on Cape Cod. And I was 15 years old, first job in high school.
I also
And
had that job at
I,
that
I,
at that
I had,
company.
had to talk to two managers, and the district manager happened to be there that day. So they had him interview me. So I've got the guy who's in charge of all of that region interviewing me for bagging groceries. And he's
And you're
like,
15.
yeah, and I'm 15. I hadn't had a paper route. I actually had a paper route for the same paper we worked for too. That's another fun story.
I did
Um,
too.
but yeah, but he talked to me and he said, you're the most important thing here. And it's funny, I learned that because brand is everything and everyone relates to the brand that day when I was 15 years old. But he said, you're the most important most important employee in this business. He's like, they can do without me. He's like, this place will run if we don't have a district manager. Like, they can do it without Bill and they can do it without Bob. Those two guys, we can run the store. He's like, the meat cutters and stuff, we need them. But he's like, but you're the most important customer service person here. And then he took me out, and there was a sign above the door that said, we carry out your orders. And
Yeah.
it talked about, we won't accept tips, and it's our service. And it was basically their mission statement written in a way of, you take your groceries to your car. And he said, if you crush the woman's bread or you put the wrong way in her trunk and she gets home, this store is going to have a bad reputation. That's why you're the most important employee here. And I learned what later became my tagline of, because brand is everything, and the value of every job in every company right out of the gate, my first real job. So
That's so funny. We've basically lived parallel lives. I also continued to bag my own groceries because at Angelo's they taught you how to do it, and the whole bread thing was like a big deal. Like you're gonna get in trouble if somebody's bread got smushed.
well,
And
I
it seems
find
like
it.
not very many stores have that same opinion on
Yeah,
it.
they don't use them anymore, and they all put them in plastic for years, so they don't even understand a paper bag. And here in Providence, you have to use paper. So
Yeah,
I know
they do
exactly how to.
here too.
I know how to bag a paper bag like no tomorrow. I was trained at 15 to do that. So it's funny because I'll go around the front, and if there's not someone bagging groceries, I'll be, and the cashier's looking at me like, how the heck do you bag that so fast? Because I learned a long time ago. But
Yeah.
but it's important, whether you're the receptionist. And the thing is, when you get out of school, you might, take a job where you think you're going to be, a stockbroker, and then all of a sudden you find you're an admin or a receptionist or whatever. But you're also vital too, so don't forget that, and remember what you're going to learn in that first thing. Don't get stuck in that reception job, but
Yes.
learn how to utilize that reception job to learn. Had the lumberyard been in better shape, and I mean, I might end up the marketing director at some point, kind
Right.
of a thing. But yeah, don't you always learn something, and you are a vital part of an organization, no matter what you're doing in it, and there's always a lesson in it.
Yeah, and I think that another good point that you brought up in our pre-call was talking about opportunities and taking advantage of opportunities when you have them. But just to kind of wrap up that section, one of the big takeaways is that it's okay to take a step back to reinvest in yourself, and that's what ROI and you really stands for, is return on investment in yourself. And learning skills that are going to leapfrog your career, really launch your career, is really important. Um, and the skills that we really emphasize are soft skills as well as technical skills that you're just not getting anyplace else, and you're probably not going to pick up, from reading Seth Godin's blog. That's a sentence, email a sentence every day. Eventually, yes, you will put all those pieces together, but the goal is to really very quickly ramp up and get recent grads into internships, into interviews, and into careers that they will really love and launch. Now, and then one of the things that you talked about before too that I think is important was the work-life balance issue. And you think about it the way that I think about it, in hindsight, that there's times and opportunities, and that, like you said, what did you say? House, spouse, cars, and kids?
Yeah, so I learned from my advertising professor. I learned two really good lessons from him. One was the idea of that you will be criticized in your career, and as a creative, and you have to have thick skin and let it roll off you. But the other one he said is that, and he said it in a very Mad Men-esque kind of a way, because he was a 1960s, like, probably, had the liquor cabinet in his office when he was in ad
Love it.
agencies. And he said, don't ever get married, don't ever have kids, don't ever buy a car, don't ever buy a house. He said, and that's the only way you make it in this business. And I was like,
Jeez.
okay.
How uplifting.
But what he really meant by it is that if you make choices in life that don't allow you to be flexible, that you can turn on a dime. If you can't move from Providence to Boston to New York City to Chicago to LA at any given moment, if you have to sell your house, if you have a spouse that also has a job, if you have kids that are in a school, if you can't work long hours because you have a puppy, those things will all take away from your ability to thrive in your career. Now, you know, the funny part about it is he said, I did those all wrong. And he said, and I don't regret any of them because
Hmm.
he said, I like where I am now. But he said, you have that choice between the two. And, and I kind of tried to straddle the line for years, but what I found is that you're you can't have it all, and that's okay. Spending time, growing your family or in relationships or whatever is just as quality and just as rewarding. And just because you aren't a millionaire at 35 is okay if you've built a great life and a great family and enjoy yourself. So, it's no choice is right or wrong. You just have to realize that every choice you make is going to lead you one way or another, and you're going to have to make sacrifices in certain ways. And there are some people that make sacrifices, and as an entrepreneur or in their career, and don't see their children as much, and then they get to be older and regret that. And there are other people who spent more time with their children and have rewarding, lovely lives with being soccer coaches and scout leaders and all of the things like that. And it takes them longer to launch their career. I've got friends who spend a lot of time with their families who are now launching businesses or going back into the work world, and going in the direction they always wanted to go. And there's no right or wrong answer to any of it. You just have to know that you can't have it all, and if you try to, you'll kill yourself. Because I've done it at times, and it's not easy.
Oh yeah, for certain. And yeah, but I think it speaks to, if you're a recent grad or an emerging professional, that there really is a time that you should be aggressive about your career, right? Because especially, I mean, I'll be honest, when you're a woman, like, hey, if you want to have a family, your early 30s are really the pivotal time to be thinking about that and working on that. So in your 20s, I think, yeah, the focus should really be on stabilizing yourself, who you are, what you want to do, and really be pushing forward on your career, because that is the time that, especially if you're a woman, you really need to maximize and position yourself so that when you have a family, that you're in, that you know enough, that you're in a skilled and desired position, that people are going to work with you when your kid is sick. What you don't want is to be the low man on the totem pole, and have a boss who is not going to be flexible. That's just a nightmare because, like you said, oftentimes your career has to take a little bit of a back seat, but you should be positioned where, ideally, where it's like, this week or this month, or, something's going on at school, or this day, I'm not going to be there, and to work for a company or an agency that appreciates that and understands that. And I think more and more agencies get that. And I think more companies get that, especially because of COVID and work remote, that if you want good employees, you are going to have to provide that. On the flip side, though, you have to have good work remote skills. And because ROI&U is built on this internship program that I've run for 11 years now, which has been 100% remote. Like, I think the past 5 interns I have never met. And they are highly productive because we teach them how to do it. These are all acquired skills that are not taught in college, that's for sure.
Well, and I think so. 20s is your time to not take the stable job, to take that job in that company that may not make it, but you're going to get some really great experience with, or to, take that short term employment that's going to get you access to somebody, or into an agency or a place that you didn't. I think, my recommendation to kind of take what my professor has said is to go out and really, you know, have a go bag where you can go anywhere you want, and then go seek out the best opportunities that you can in the time when you have nothing tying you down. And I think that's what he meant by it is not having things that tie you down, which tends to be that right out of college, is the perfect time to go out there and gain the skills, to get the notoriety in your industry, to do all of those things. So like you said, then when you hit your 30s and 40s and you want to kind of settle down a little bit, people will come seek you out, and you don't have to, now you've got a reputation, now you've got a skill set that where you put your resume out there that people are like, oh yeah, I want them, and I want them in whatever, capacity I can get them, because they have got that great skill set or that great reputation.
And
And
we haven't talked about portfolios at all, but the portfolio really is what backs that up, right? Is that you're not just sitting there talking about what's on your resume, that you get to open up a portfolio and you have prepared it digitally, they've looked at it, but that there are things to talk about. It makes the interview so much easier.
and to have things in your portfolio that are not only work related. I remember hiring designers over the years, and having things in your portfolio that push the edge a little bit. So some really good pieces that come from work you've done, but then, the ones that are, what do you do, in your spare time to create art or to write, if you're a writer or whatever, so that I have I figure out who you are. And I think that's the big thing now. That's where it's very different. When I started my company, it was image identity, because you wanted to appear to be this big company with lots of people, and nowadays, because of social media and because of, as we talked at the beginning of this, the relationship piece of everything, people really want to know who you are. They want to know a little bit about you, and what do you do, and so if you're a writer or you're not, creating art or marketing and public relations and digital and whatever, having that really cool short film you worked on, or having, that screenplay that you've written, or that play you wrote, that's another thing to show people, because it rounds you out. And yeah, while they'll never have you write a play for their business, having a little snippet of it is going to get a real sense of who you are and the level of creativity and skills you have.
And capacity for growth, right? Because that's ultimately
Right.
what everybody wants. And that's another key point that, if you're looking outside of our agency partners, that anyone is going to look at and say, oh, wow, you really invested in yourself. You've took the time to complete the course to, learn what you're missing, what's going on. And the focus on the course is, from the technical side, is really all the things that are too current, right? Because the goal is to get you right into a position where you are working. You don't have to do this big ramp up of, okay, watch these 15 videos and let's have a conversation. That's all done. And we don't do it that way anyway. But that way you go in and they hand you, a brief and say, okay, get to work. Start editing this video, or, work on the SEO. Here's the keyword list, work on the content, depending on, what track potentially a student would want to go in. There's tons of opportunities and tons of agencies who are looking for skilled workers.
Well, and programs like this are great to round that out. I went to Bryant, and Bryant back then had very little creative. There wasn't a communication department. There wasn't a TV studio. There wasn't, so yeah, I left Bryant and became a multimedia developer and video editor, but it wasn't because I took a single class at Bryant. It was because
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it as a hobby on the side, and I had access to community access stations and friends who had video production. And I volunteered on March of Dimes telethons on Nantucket and on Cape Cod. And I did all these things. And that's how I landed that job. Yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
degree helped, but a lot of people think, well, I go and I take these classes and then that's going to be what gets me the job. No, that's just gives you the basics. Then you need to really get out there, and whether it's through a program like this, or whether it's hobbies that you have or whatever, that's where you're starting to develop stuff that, and the added skills and the doing it all the time. Especially in the media world, I mean, it's so easy now. If I had, it's an iPhone or a Samsung and the editing software that
I
we
know,
have now,
right?
back then,
Yeah.
God knows where I would have been, because we had to go find somebody that had equipment and stuff. And now it's so easy to get yourself out there and put, your crazy, wonderful short film you created over the weekend, up on YouTube, and let people see it. There's so much more opportunity to round out stuff these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, full circle back to our early newspaper experience. I remember being a reporter and having to take my own pictures and giving film to the photographers to develop in the darkroom. So
Yep.
that's,
That's good
it's so
work.
much easier now.
Yeah, my desk was right near the dark room. I remember. Don't open that door when he's working.
Yeah, yeah. And also it had a little smell to it.
Oh
I'd
yeah.
be working there. Oh, I know it well. Well, Dave, all right, full circle. This was so great. And thank you so much for all your amazing tips. We're going to get this posted and check out the show notes because there's a couple other tidbits and takeaways from Dave, who is an amazing branding, marketing consultant, and business consultant overall. And we love having your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.